Hello, welcome back to IDAGIO Live for our 5th episode on the Bach cello suites. Today, the Menuet, or I should say the Menuets from the first suite. Our guest in about 15 minutes will be Jean-Guihen Queyras, extraordinary violinist. Let's have a go at the Menuet first. So, as you see, a dance in 3 beats. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Rather uplifting, rather in a rather middle quick tempo. Although there are menuets in many different tempos. Maybe Jean-Guihen will tell us more about this, about the history of the menuet and its variations through the times. But what will be particular about these penultimate dances in all the suites is that they are a gender called galanterie. And I suppose this comes from society at first, that in the French understanding of the term galanterie, it has in itself a connotation of a certain, I would almost say a certain, maybe a bit conservative ordonnancement of society, where the man is supposed to open the door for the lady, or, you know, it's about this reflection on duality. And there are many ways, of course, to apply this duality and this galanterie in musical terms, as we will see along the 6 suites. So again, the idea is to play with, one could say, either oppositions or poles that will interact with each other. In this case, you have heard this first menuet. It is very positive and uplifting, and inevitably the Menuet 2 will have a rather introverted character. And the way Bach plays on this duality is basically in all the different ways that are at his disposal. The first one is the tonality. G major for the Menuet 1, G minor for the second Menuet. He will apply this system to the first 3 suites, and then for the last 3 suites, from suite 4, he will not anymore do an opposition of tonality, but he will use other means that we will explore. So, tonality in this case, as you see, very different. Then the motif. The motif of our first Menuet is an arpeggio, an ascending arpeggio that we have basically from the prelude. If you remember, right, of course. So it starts with this motif that goes up, right? And throughout this Menuet, we will have this motif that goes up. Yeah, and then second half, yeah, and then. So always these 3 notes going up. The second Menuet, as you already guessed, I'm sure. So our G minor chord is played from the top note, and not anymore from the bottom note. So that's a second opposition. The third one is the way he uses embellishments, ornaments. I'm talking now not about the ones that we can improvise as an interpreter, but the ones that are written by the composer. So after doing in the Menuet 1, after doing his arpeggio, embellishment, he goes around this upper note in a way that is, I find, like a butterfly, something that gives an energy, a buoyancy, an English word I like. In the Menuet 2, on the other hand, it starts with in a way, with an embellishment of this main note B flat, but as you can see, in this way, it's more like a plaintive always a half step in both cases, going down and up. So again, yes, embellishments, ornaments on both sides, but in a very different, with a very different outcome. And the last very clear way that, which might be one of the most important, that he uses to play on this contrast is the bass line. And here again we have in the Menuet 1 a sort of an ascending bass line that will go from G, that will make to arrive to D major at the end of the first part, and it will be an ascending line. And on the contrary, in the Menuet 2, it will be this descending line, which is almost like a passacaille. It will not be a passacaille in this case, but the line is totally like a passacaille. So I play the whole thing now. So he really tries to, to really stick to the book in this first suite. I remember we mentioned this also in the sarabande last time, that in this first suite he really wants to be very clear about the how do you say, the challenges that he gives himself. That's going to be Menuet 1. I'm going to use, so in this case with the bass line, very strict, going from D in the first part, in the first Menuet, and going also from G to D, also from the tonica to the dominant, but with the descending line. I remember this is one of the dances where my experience with Anne-Theresa de Kersmaker and the project Mitten was decisive in helping me to feel these two different types of menuets, because in these dances Anne-Theresa would ask her dancer to really, in a way, stick to the book and walk the bass line in a very strict way. And in the first Menuet they would give this sort of energy that so I was really relating to them in this way to give steps that would lift them. And in the Minore, in the Menuet 2, in this case Mika, who is the one dancing the first suite, would have a very slow paced steps, very close to the floor. And that would really help me to feel this also in the way I play. Which brings me to a question, one of your questions. By the way, I know I repeat myself, please keep sending your questions. It's very helpful, it's very inspiring, and I'm so happy about this response. So thank you. Please know that whenever you send me something, that fills me with buoyancy again. So today a question from Jeffrey Wang. We already had a question from Jeffrey, I remember, in one of the first episodes. And his question about these particular kind of dances was this. About tempi in the galanteries, is there any specific rule one should consider regarding the relationship between part 1 and 2? This we have just discussed. For instance, how much can they vary? How much can you vary from one Menuet to the other one? And I guess your question, Jeffrey, is probably in many different ways. How much can they vary in character? This we have just discussed. Can they vary in tempo? can they vary in the way you play? And this, I would like to tell my conviction, is that you can vary a lot. You will feel very free to vary a lot, including in timing, including in tempo, if whatever you do comes from the dancing feeling, from how is the Menuet grooving, how is it moving us. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So if you try to look for this very strong contrast, which the composer wants and wants you to do, and if you try to look for it while always leaving it in relation with your dance, I think you cannot make big mistakes if you go at it that way. That's what I'm really, really convinced about. One thing still about technically how to apply what we just talked about. How do you play uplifting with the bow? How do you play sad? How do you play more? So, and I would say try to look at your arm like it is the reflection of your soul. This is ideally what we are trying. That's our mantra, I think, as string players, all our life. So, and that means in the first minuet, I will want my right arm to be very free, I can give a lot of bow. And as I don't know how much you can hear with the type of communication we have here at distance, but I sometimes let the bow float over the strings very freely. And in the Menuet too, when I try to express something where the soul is not as free and, you know, as liberated, well, it will be the same here. I will not let my arm just go like this. I will rather let my arm go in contact with the sound, let a bit more of the weight of my arm will feel heavier, and therefore it will be also slower. I mean, the bow speed will be slower. So I hope this is helpful. One little detail I forgot, and I wanted to mention to you before we go and talk with Amandine. Even though it's a bit of a step back in my discourse, and I apologize for this. If you look at the last 8 bars of the first minuet compared with the last 8 bars of the second minuet. First minuet. Everything is in ascending. The motive, of course, yeah, but also the bass. So we really went up. And in the last 8 bars of the second minuet, our bass line, we are in minor, that's one thing, but also our bass line is going, and the very last thing I will say, I promise, and then we go to our talk with Amandine, is that, of course, it wouldn't be Bach if this duality would be 100%, because I think for Bach and for all these great geniuses, life is not black and white. Nothing is 100%. We are always on this line looking for what truth, or in this case, music could be. So, and in the second half, the second part of the second Menuet, it's very interesting how Bach actually uses the ascending material of the first Menuet. First note of the second half of first Menuet is and first note of the second part of the second Menuet. And here he gives us, through this actual motif from the first Menuet, there is an interaction. It's not simply Menuet 1, Menuet 2, because that would be less interesting. And see how through this interaction we even get a little major episode. Which is one of my favorite passages in the whole first suite, because we explore B flat major. And it's the only time, of course, that we are allowed access to this key through the G minor. And I find it such a generous and touching moment. Wonderful. I think today, for one of the first times in these first episodes, I have managed to be in time to welcome our guest, dear Amandine. Are you there, dear Amandine? I am approaching, putting on my headphones. Oh, yes, here you are. Welcome, dear Amandine.
Yes.
Amandine Bayer.
Hello, Jean-Guihen.
Hello, Amandine. So it's so wonderful. Thank you for taking the time to be here. So I want to say a little anecdote before we go in the real subject. Is that last time I mentioned you because you taught me something very important about ornaments once when we shared a concert in Paris. And I told this story, you know. And then immediately there was someone, I forgot the name, but made a comment on my post on Facebook saying, Amandine Bayer, she's so inspiring. She's just simply the best. So immediately, so I'm so happy that you are here today in the wake of this great enthusiasm that you provoke in this. So I have a first maybe banal question, dear Amandine. The cello suite for us cellists, there are some people call it the Bible, some whatever. They are with us our whole life because, of course, I think for many different reasons, because we don't have such an extensive repertoire as the violin has, and probably and of course as the piano and everything, but also because they are very accessible in a way in their language, so that in the history, if, you know, Casals and today, of course, Yo-Yo Ma, they take these suites, or took in case of Casals, these suites as like as a message of peace that is universally heard and that is universally accessible. So they have this place in our life which is not only very central, but in a way very philosophical. How is it for the partitas and sonatas for violin, which are so rich, so dense, but I have the feeling maybe even more ambitious than the cello suites? How is it for you as a violinist?
I think perhaps people will find it very strange, but I really like the cello suites much more than the violin pieces. Yes, just now, of course, we can, with the music, what the good is that we can never say there is a winner or there is a loser. It's always a matter of moment and taste. But of course, what you said about the suite cello, exactly also what Anne-Teresa said the first day, that you taught to them this luminous simplicity and engagement. I think it's where Bach is really, for me, at his best for me, when he managed to have a very simple way to say great things. Because with the violin, of course, it's more ambitious, but in a way, sometimes we get lost into the difficulty for my taste. It's much more a challenge. When I hear, or sometimes I practice it a little bit on the viola, when I hear the cello suite, I feel comfortable. I feel dancey. I feel I want to listen to it. I want to listen the first, the second, in the disorder. And if I hear the violin or if I play, it's not that I suffer, but each time it's like much more how we manage to do it, much more how we perform it. So it's more how we find the trick to go over the difficulty, and sometimes we just smash our face on all the chords. And of course, it's because of the nature of the instrument. The violin had for Bach quality. We can play chords, but it's much more difficult, I think, with the cello. So it's because of it's a huge dimension. It's much bigger. And so Bach said, "Oh, wonderful! I have 4 strings. I can do 4-note chords everywhere." But I think sometimes he overlaps the fact that it's not very easy and it's not very funny also. And so when he had, I think he had in mind the cello, he had his harmony fulfilled by the bass register of the cello. So for him, I think the harmony is really so important, and this bass line you always speak about. So this kind of sub line that it's just always there. In the cello, it's really in the nature of the instrument. In the violin, it could be, but it's not so evident. And then he said, okay, I have a little bit bass, but I have all chords and I have also soprano. So we had many times 3-note chords or 4-note chords. And that's why we had not only suite, but that means partita, that's the same, but also sonata. And that's when the thing began to be very tricky, because we have 3 fugue. And you spoke a bit, you have a little like a fugue in the fifth suite when we spoke, I think, with Pierre-Laurent Aymar. And of course, it's wonderful because it's just like this kind of brainstorming about note and themes and that. But the problem with the violin is he goes through for pages and pages, and sometimes I'm just jealous about cello player.
Yeah, the C major fugue. I don't know how you guys can do that. This is just like unimaginable for us. But I have another question, Amandine, because you also had before me, a few years before me, a wonderful experience with Anne-Theresa de Kersmaker, with Partita, and then you had after me yet again this wonderful journey with the Brandenburg concertos, with your ensemble. And I would like to pass on to you a question from Nirina, who asked me, how has this interaction with Anne-Theresa, with the dancers, influenced your playing? And this is something I talked about a little bit in one of the first 2 episodes. But could you say something about that in your case?
Yeah, of course, with a lot of pleasure. I think for me it was a bit like for you, the meeting with Anne-Theresa and Rosa's team, and in my case, I began with Anne-Theresa alone, and she was with Boris Charmat, who is another dancer who was not in the company at this time, but also a great choreographer and a wonderful person. So we were 3 on stage, 2 dancers and a violin. And finally, I felt release of this weight of the piece on my shoulders that I think we all carry, the violinist. And I encourage all people, all violinists, first to play a lot the cello suite and to play a lot of simple jigs and courante and Menuet, because you just perform wonderfully Menuet. And I was looking in my E major, that's the only Menuet we have in the 3 suite we have. And it's all full of double stops. So I would like to play but the and then it's just like sometimes just a nightmare. You just begin very fresh and very enthusiastic, and after 3 bars you are done. So with partita, I only played on stage but it was enough for me, the D minor, but twice in the evening. And it was amazing because, as you said, it's like chamber music. You said it in the first one. You spoke about this playing with the steps of the dancers, or having this rapport, this prefen, I don't know anymore of in English, this meeting with a dancer, or with two dancers, or even with a group with the grand bourgeois. But you can imagine your music into the space. And that first, you are not alone, so it's a lot of release. And second, instead of, I like strings, I love instruments. Anyway, I love music, but I'm really fond of instrumental music because I love the movement we have. And violin is quite a visual instrument, but cello even more. So you have this space into around you. And with the violin, sometimes a bit more seen. And also it's when you see where we play, it's just like 3, 4 centimeters here and 2 there. And in this small space, you have to do many, many tricky things. And to see the music unfolded on stage, to see that my Menuet, I was not playing, when we play Grand Bourgeois, we have Menuet. And that this line you are speaking about sometimes is just in our mind, or just in the string, just in and here, like up and down. It can be really forwards, backwards, turn, jump, roll. And it's amazing because then, of course, we know, but sometimes we know things, but until we see it or we feel it on stage, it's such. So I really recommend to all people to have an experience with this suite with other people. You can do with dancers, you can do with puppets, you can do instead sometimes because mostly we have problems. But no, sarabande, instead of playing you alone, you play with a colleague. So he's playing the bass, or you play with a cello. You really invest your mind into you sing for you. I'm always singing for me the bass line. And that's much more fun, really. And I think it's really important for me to have fun in this piece and to not forget why. Then, sorry, last thing. It's chamber music, but it's also, as you said, for the suite and the partita, it's dance music. And for me, it's very important when we speak about Baroque music to have this sociality, why we play and for whom. And also, if sometimes with Bach, of course, it's like we always say, it's not really a dance, it's really figurative, it's not anymore a dance, but still, I mean, of course, perhaps people will not dance directly, perhaps he was a genius, of course, but he was a great resume of the music history. So perhaps he didn't really sing to dance, but he has his dance in his memories. So he wanted to, he knows how to do to make the people. That was what was the choreography really like. In the Menuet is always a French Menuet. It was in the front, in the back, and then you turn, and then it's over. The first part is always 8 parts, and it's forever. And it's so nice to have it and to know that you are not alone, and people will be there, not to listen if you make a mistake, but just to dance or imagine the dance. And for me, this purpose of the music, not only pure music, of course, it's pure and amazing and fantastic and in the mind and the Bible and everything, but also a very concrete music to enjoy and not too much to suffer.
My goodness, Amandine, so much stuff in what you just said. Thank you so much. It's fantastic. I want to catch on some of the words you said and just repeat them because they speak to my heart. So, dear friends out there, sing, dance, and I also love what you said about that at first, we think we have this bow on this very little space to go back and forth, as you said, and then that made me think of what Jean-Guihen said. He said, the bow is round. The bow is round. So when you play, don't think back and forth in straight lines, go in rounds like dancers. Now, for our last question, dear Amandine, I would like to actually read some questions from, from two persons who sent me questions, Haik and Camille Jerez Aguilar. I apologize for the pronunciation, somebody from South America, obviously. And both questions are about modern instrument, Baroque instrument, gut strings things. So I read them quickly. The question by Haik is quite substantial. I would like to state rather a general question about Bach's cello suites. Ideal would be to play them on authentic instruments, on my current point of view, with Baroque bow, gut strings, etc., which brings us certain technical tasks completely different from modern cellos. So the question is how to find the right balance playing on modern instruments with contemporary methods, but yet not losing the pure Baroque pronunciation. What would be your thoughts, advices about it for people who are constantly in search of it? That was Haik. And I put in the basket the question by Camille or Camille, I don't know how to pronounce it. At the moment of working on these Baroque dances, I'm aware that I have a modern cello and modern bow. How should I guide my interpretation? So I think this is something anyways that I will have to go into examples in some other episodes and everything. But I thought, since we have you, Amandine, you play. I think you play them. I have played them for very long. The suites on gut strings for many years, and I still do sometimes. But because I've been going into this. Doing the whole cycle and not changing instrument to the 5-string instrument for the 6th suite and all these things. So I'm doing all these compromises, and this, in my capacities, has to be on modern cello. And of course, remembering what Harnoncourt said, that it's not about what instrument you play, but how you play it. Nevertheless, I find these questions so interesting and so important. And I've always heard you play this repertoire on gut strings. Is it always the case? And how do you deal with that?
Are you here? Yes. Because sometimes my connection
yes, I lost
always
you. And now I see you. Yes.
Yes, and now I hear you well. So it's a gut string attitude. Some parasite. Okay, I think you gave a part of the answer. I think there is no answer, because it's, of course, what I really liked with all the movement with hype, that means historical informed practice and gut strings and research. It's fantastic. It's my world. It's my work since years. So I cannot say it's nothing, but it was by chance I came into it, and then I stayed there just because I tell you, really, because in a way it is easier. I just show you something. I don't know for the cello, but I have my Baroque basic violin forever, like my instrument. I almost play every time, and I don't know if you can see it, that the bridge is very, very flat. And I have the bridge is, for people, the bridge is this piece. I took my quite modern instrument. I don't know, I perhaps cannot appreciate it and it's not really like a modernist transition. So, and the bridge is much more like and it's really, and the other part is, that's my modern bow. Dun, dun, dun. And that's my standard Baroque bow, completely other aerodynamic, so a very thin and another curve, and very, very, very light. And if I have to say, it's much easier to play this repertoire with this instrument, just because the bow is lighter and because the bridge is flatter. And then the bridge flat, that means you can play more strings together without getting too much into cracks and problems. And the first day, I think, or second day I saw you playing, you spoke about this movement you have to do, like the violin, we have to go up and down and this. And sometimes if it's flatter, it's just everything a bit nearer. And also the bow is lighter, so everything is a bit easier. So nevertheless, gut strings are sometimes a nightmare. I just say it, but they are also very good teachers, because you learn a lot with gut string. You learn about your nerves. You learn about the weather. You learn to deal with many organic things that's not still, but that really, like, it was alive at one point. So it's a mix of very good and bad things. And I just encourage the people, if they have the occasion, like you had, just to have a taste of it, because it's a pity to die without to try it. And but really, I that's really my opinion. Just now, perhaps I will change in few years, but it's about commodity. It's about your life, what you do, I mean, I can imagine you have to travel. You have if it's I can even not imagine how you do with the cello. And if you have to have two cello, because this day you play Bach, but the second day you have to play something else. And I mean, sometimes it's just not possible to have like always a perfect setting. And also because we are human, and for me, I made a choice, because I cannot play gut string a day and another day I'm not so good, and I cannot be specialist in every field. So I had a moment to choose, and I'm happy with my choices for now. But I encourage people to be curious, and then a lot also to not feel ashamed if they don't think they have the right setup. Because and for the cello, I think it's much better, because I don't know how it is, but you don't have these all chords, and the dynamic of the instrument, I think, because everything is a bit bigger, you can find this light. I don't know why, but I have the impression the lightness come a bit easier, because sometimes if it's heavy or light, it's very complicated, because we have always to compensate. If it's a bit like more under, and like cello or harpsichord or piano, or I have the impression I don't say it's easier, your job is easier, but in a way I think it's more friendly to the modern instrument. For the violin, it's really easier in a way for the gut, and then you can carry more easily, more violin. But if you don't have, if you live in South America and it's a nightmare with the weather, and because it's too humid or too hot, and then you feel your bow is not, you couldn't manage to have a baroque bow of your dreams. Also, they are much cheaper. So, I think it's important you don't feel wrong, because I got many calls, or many. Last week I had a very nice meeting on by internet with a wonderful modern violinist, and her big concern was to make a mistake, because she's so good with her instrument as a modern violinist, and she thought she's not allowed anymore to touch Bach, because if she doesn't do this and those, we are in the 21st century. Plenty of things are available. So tutorials. I really loved. I saw the 4 first episode of your action on internet. You have recordings, video, Chinese bows. Well, now just or instruments. People getting. I have friends in Italy or even in the world doing synthetic gut string, especially for people having a problem with due to the weather or not enough money to afford this, because these strings is just a huge money. I buy strings like crazy, because it just get broken every time. So everything in the world, we have a lot of things are possible. So don't feel don't feel upset. Sometimes there is too many choices, but it's music. You can do what you want, actually. And you said it before with the tempo and the rubato in the Menuet, and if you use more bow and less bow, if you like it, well, just go for it. I mean, and you play now with modern cello, but I'm completely happy to listen to you. I will not say, oh no, I cannot listen to it. Well, it's your fantasy and it's your world. And I'm teaching in a very purist school in Basel. And I love it because, of course, I think there is important. We have places like museum or place like school where people are, in a way, veillent. Je sais pas comment on dit en anglais. Veille sur les valeurs.
On values. They want to go in depth in the.
Yeah, and that's fantastic and that's important. But we cannot be always so perfect. So all over the world there is a lot of people, and I say to all people, keep going, keep playing, and keep trying, because this music is a treasure, and you can play this. And also, before you cut me because I'm speaking too much, Paolo will say it, because of course the gamba players, they have a lot of repertory for gamba with this dance suite, a lot of suite. And violin, well, gamba and violin, it's not, we have also a lot, almost never alone, because nobody was like Bach and wanted to make so many chords. So a lot of this is with continuo, but play a lot of music around Bach to have this understanding of the flow of the phrase, of the music, and then go slowly or directly, but nearby. You spoke a lot about this small river or huge river that can be Bach, no? And there is many other rivers in this time. You have plenty of French. A lot of this music is coming from French suite dance. So you have Rebel and Francoeur, and a lot of people writing amazing things. And if you play Lully and Marais, but you have also Spanish music, and you have Italian music, and playing scordatura. Sometimes we think it's only Bach in the cello made something, and perhaps Bieber, but plenty of people, just also Vivaldi and also Schmelzer, and also a lot of people with Maya, just investigated with the instrument and with the tuning. So play with your instrument. Sometimes I discovered it late, and sometimes I'm a bit afraid or lazy to do it. But I think it's a thing. Listen to the transcription. I think the first time I heard the E major prelude, the violin, there is the same for organ. It's a sinfonia of a very huge cantata by Bach. And I just discovered it. I was 35, or I don't know. And it's a pity, because it makes your brain so huge to listen. It's with 3 trumpets and oboe and a huge core and the big organ solo, and and sometimes Bach wanted to put it in a small box like a violin, but you spoke a little bit, I think, I don't remember when, about this transcription. It's amazing to listen to this transcription of Bach. It's the same piece in different featuring, so in different shape. And,
and he was himself.
No shame, and not be afraid, because it's only music.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Amandine. It's fantastic, because one can hear in your words this extraordinary generosity that you have in your playing. So that was so good to have you today on the show. So thank you so much. Dear friends out there, we see each other very soon, because the next session will not be on Tuesday, but on Monday already. So the day after tomorrow, we will talk about the jig of the first suite, and my guest will be Emmanuel André. See you soon. Bye-bye.